Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic Odyssey. Here it is. It is Wednesday at 9:48, and it's a Wednesday morning. Pretty cold and rainy, or at least the forecast for today is that it's going to be pretty rainy and dismal. But hey, it is what it is. But we are, well into spring of 2023. So yeah, hope everyone's doing good. Excited for this year. It's been a pretty good year. I'm excited for before I start today's show, I want to just give another update and a little bit of a idea as to what is going on in the Quantum Camp, my band, my electronic group. I've had Quantum now for quite a few years, almost 7 years. It's hard to believe. Every now and then on when on the old Facebooks, you get those and the anniversary reminders of like a photo or something, or some event that uh, you know you you were involved with over the years. So, and I'm always like, every time something like that pops up, I'm always like, damn, it's been that long already. But it's been, as far as that band goes and Quantum, it's been just just an amazing journey in a lot of ways. It was something. When I look at Quantum, and then kind of where it started, kind of and then where it's evolved to, and kind of where it's at now, and even back when even years before I actually started the group, and I always had, I don't know, I was always drawn to the idea of doing something that would eventually become Quantum, which into itself is kind of always a strange thing for me, mostly a positive thing. But I always look at it as, at the end of the day, it truly is like a dream realized for me, because it's something I always wanted to do. Ever since, especially when I first, even going back to when I was a kid and I got exposed to electronic music, and I've talked about that a little bit in other shows, but even back when I was a little kid, like even in middle school, when I first heard Depeche Mode, and remember that was the first electronic band I ever heard, and I remember buying Violator on cassette, and that was 2,000 years ago at this point, and I remember just I was in middle school. I was a kid, and I had not at that point I had no experience playing music. I never picked up an instrument. I was At that point I was a fan of music. I was listening to the first few bands I got exposed to were groups like Kiss, Ozzy Osbourne, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, things like that. I was really into those bands, and Kiss was the band that got me into rock and roll, basically, and got me into music. And it was all due to like their whole presentation, seeing videos of them on TV, where it was this like huge theatrical presentation. And I've heard that common story that is across, you hear across the boards about musicians, how they got into music, and they always refer to when they saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan as being like that moment of where that light went off, and they might have been a little kid or a baby even, or in high school or whatnot, but it was always an experience of when they were from that childlike perspective. And you hear that story. That's the most probably, I don't know. That's the biggest story you always hear in that performance when the Beatles made their debut on the Ed Sullivan Show. That basically inspired millions of people to pick up instruments. and got them to be fans of, rock and roll and music in general. And for me, like that same experience was seeing Kiss on television for the first time, where they were on stage playing these. They were these real life comic book characters. At that time, I was also really into comic books. I still am, although I don't like collect them like I used to. But so the culmination of being a fan as being a kid, a little kid, and loving comic books. I was really into Daredevil, Batman, the Avengers, all kinds of Captain America, all kinds of comic books, and being exposed to like music like Ozzy Osbourne or Black Sabbath. And then suddenly, when I saw Kiss on television, or when I saw clips on television, and in particularly around, and well, I should say the situation of how I saw them, or the way I saw them is pretty funny too, because I remember seeing Kiss for the first time on a religious show. It was like this Christian fundamentalist show, and the whole focus of that show was basically the dangers of heavy metal music. And so they had a show where they talked about all of these heavy metal bands and how they were in league with the devil. And they had bands like AC/DC on there. They had Motley Crue. And their main focus was, they also had Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath, but the main focus was Kiss. And they even, went as far as saying, well, AC/DC, the name of the band actually stood for Antichrist Devil Child. Just completely crazy. And then the biggest one was Kiss, where they said that the name actually stood for Knights in Satan's Service. And seeing that as a little kid, I don't know, maybe 10 or 11 years old, and they would show these videos of them. Kiss had put out some music videos at that point, and also, it was right at the cusp of MTV. But there was also, I remember them showing live concert clips of Kiss. And that was, the kind of the tail end of Kiss's career as far as their makeup stage. And I remember just being enamored by seeing them, and suddenly it was just like, holy mackerel! Like that, seeing them in that context in that show was that moment of where I was like, I have to listen to all of these bands, and then seeing Kiss just was for me like a next level experience of seeing my love of comic books culminating with rock and roll, and seeing these like larger than life, living, essentially seeing these guys who were like living, examples of superheroes. I mean, it was amazing. So that was like the key thing that got me into music and rock and roll. But as far as getting exposed to electronic music, I remember shortly, a few years after that experience, getting Depeche Mode's Violator on cassette. And I think I'd heard one of their songs or something on the radio, or saw a video for like Enjoy the Silence, which was the single on that album. And that was the first electronic album that I ever heard. And so I listened to, a lot of music as a kid before I got into actually trying to, pick up an instrument. And I played, eventually I took guitar lessons for about 5 or 6 years, and I played guitar for a while, and then I eventually started playing drum set. But I remember when I first got into Depeche Mode, it was yet another level of where, even at a young age, I was like, I want to start an electronic band. I don't know how I'm going to do it, what that entails, but I want to do it someday. And it was like this, I don't know, like this crystallized moment, and that's always been, etched in my head. So to think, fast forward 2,000 years later, that I actually was able to find a way to do it, and now it's been a thing for a big part of my life now. And even now, it's like this thing of where I love it more and more. I'm more and more excited by the band, and also more and more challenged by it than I've ever been, and it just makes me more excited, more enthusiastic, and I just want to do it more and more. Well, and everything that involves. It's and to me that's one of for me been like the greatest part of this journey, and also the the biggest joy I have. So, and I feel really, really fortunate to have a project where I can write my own material and kind of, call the shots, but present it in a certain way that you know, I kind of, that I want to, or that I have control to present it in a certain way that is something that's me, and it's really personalized. And I feel really fortunate because I know there are, tons and tons of great musicians around. I mean, just in this area alone, that play in various projects and bands and all of these different things. And I know and there's obviously people who are very, very successful, and they are able to put together their own original projects, and they're very, successful with that. But there are also people out there that have can't really elevate it to the point of where it's a living, breathing entity, meaning that it's a thing that is a band or a project where they're playing gigs or releasing albums, and that it's a viable thing, and it's a reality, and it's a living, breathing thing. And I realize that getting for musicians or artists to get a project off the ground, number one, the biggest challenge is getting a project off the ground that is solely original into itself is really hard. And I realize that, for a lot of people, that's the biggest struggle. So they can't really ever get it to a place of where it's a thing. So I feel really, really, really fortunate that I've been somehow, with all the craziness that's in this world and just how the world is, and considering uh, the just the changing dynamic of the music industry, and just the adjusting to all of those things. Somehow it's still happening, and somehow it's a thing, and it's a real thing, and it's something that I still call my home. I feel really, really fortunate that it's a thing, and that it's become a reality. So yeah, and so that being said, we have some shows that I'm really excited about that are coming up this year. And we have some plans for some other things later in the year, and depending, and especially the main thing is focused on, we recorded two albums last year, and then we released part one, and then we have part two that's going to be coming out possibly this year. In Dreams I Saw Chapter 1, and in Dreams I Saw Chapter 2 were two albums that we recorded together, and we decided to break them up. And originally we had the idea of putting them both out, but we decided to break them up, and we released the first part in June this past year. So this year we're going to, depending on how things go, we're seeing how we can, if a good opportunity presents itself, and also if that happens, or when that happens, we we will probably do like a formal album release show, because we've done that the last couple of times, and for the last two albums that we put out, and it was a really just an amazing experience. So, and it seems to just help the band, and it's been, really successful. So, moving forward, whenever this thing comes out again, this next album, that's what we're going to do. So, but yeah, we have some shows coming up where we're going to be playing at the Poor Farm next month, which is a really great nano brewery, microbrewery in Union. We've played there a handful of times before. It's a beautiful space, amazing beer, amazing location. So we're going to be doing a show there next month. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be, there'll be some promotion coming up very soon around that. And then we also have two shows at the All Roads Festival, which is coming up in Belfast, which I'm really excited about. It's a really great festival that has really specialized in showcasing original material for various bands. And it's a 2-day festival, and we're going to be playing Friday, and this is all going to be next month also. And we're going to be playing at the Marshall Wharf in or aka the Three Tides in Belfast that Friday night, and then Saturday we're going to be playing at the Underground Lounge. So very excited. We're going to be playing two different sets. So and then we're going to be doing a radio show on WRFR shortly after that, where we're going to be playing my friend Spencer Roulard, who I've played, who we our band Quantum has played with his electronic group, which is called Method for Madness. We've played some shows together. We played about 3 shows together last year and this year. He has a radio show on WRFR where it's all electronic music. So we're going to do a live set playing. We're going to play live on the radio. So I'm kind of excited about that. We haven't done any shows on the radio in a long time. And when the band started, when Quantum started, that was kind of how we kind of threw our hat in the ring. That was kind of how it started, was playing by playing a couple of shows on the radio, like on ERU in Blue Hill. That was like the first time. So we'll be doing another show on the radio coming up. So excited about that, and stay tuned. There'll be some promotion around that. And then we'll be also playing at the Camden Amphitheater, which is a gig that we've done it as Quantum now for probably 5 years now. It's crazy. We've done that every year for the last 5 years. We usually always do it during the summertime. We always play. It's usually on a Sunday, and it will be on a Sunday this year. And we do like a 2-hour set. It's on a Sunday afternoon. We usually start around 12:30, 1 o'clock. And I love doing that gig. I look forward to doing it every year. It's always been a blast. It's just an amazing location. It's beautiful. It's right by the ocean. It's an outdoor amphitheater. The acoustics are amazing. We do this, and it's been, I don't know, it's been kind of a tradition of ours to do every year. And I always look forward to doing that gig because we've had some amazing times playing there. The main thing about that gig that I love is just that it's really loose and laid back, and it's informal, but it's mainly the just the environment. It's a real beautiful space, and so I love the natural acoustics, because it is an amphitheater, are just amazing. So we'll be doing that again this year, and that's going to be coming up in June, I believe. And then we just booked another show where we will be back at the Gypsy Rose in Camden, which is a new venue that just opened up actually the beginning of this year, which is a really exciting venue that has been knocking things out of the park as far as having so many great events. There's been lots of things happening there, lots of music, really great food, and it's been it's really helped. That place has really helped a lot of local musicians, especially since they opened in the middle of the winter. So we played we did a Quantum show there about 2 or 3 weeks after they opened. So they had just opened, and we were one of the first bands. And I've gone there since a bunch of times, and I've played some other gigs there, and I've seen how every week or every month it's just, it feels like that the momentum has just been growing. And it's been, a really cool experience being a part of a venue from its, infant stages and seeing where it's at now. So we're going to be doing another Quantum show there in July, which I'm really excited about. So stay tuned, eventually for some promotional things around that. And then another gig that just came up, which I'm really, really excited about, is that we're going to be doing a set at Primo Restaurant in in Owl's Head or Rockland, Maine, which is just one of the greatest restaurants pretty much on planet Earth. It's and it's such an amazing atmosphere. It's totally a self-sustained restaurant. They grow all of their own food and produce. Was fortunate enough to play quite a few gigs there or I should say the last 2 years. They do these music events on Sundays during the summer, late spring, summertime, and it's an amazing atmosphere. They have an outside kind of amphitheater barn kind of space, but then they also have another space of where it's also outside, and it's by this fire pit that they have. They have amazing food and drinks, and it's just a beautiful spot out there. And it's a space I didn't ever think that a band like ours could play at. So I'm really excited about doing that show. So we're going to be doing that show in August. So yeah, stay tuned for some more events, and no, obviously there will also be lots of promotion around that show coming up. So yeah, some really fun happenings coming up, and stay tuned for more events coming up. So today's show, I'm really excited about. This is about sort of a brand new movie. And you always hear about this whole thing about, there's not a lot of good new movies coming out, and there's like people, I see that on YouTube a lot, where there's the last few years there hasn't been good movies coming out, and that, like, Hollywood is just a pile of crap, and then also I've seen also people attack to a degree independent filmmaking, especially A24 or which is a fabulous, or A24, which is a fabulous studio that makes these kind of independent, somewhat art house oriented horror films. But they have been really doing some really interesting films, and a lot of I've seen people say, well, they're just a bunch of pretentious you know fart heads, and that they don't really the movies don't really have any depth, and they get lost in their own heads as filmmakers. But I think they have been putting out some really great films, and they're more or less independent films. But as far as new releases go, I think there's been some really great releases, new films. The best movie I've seen this year so far is the John Wick Chapter 4 movie. Just a spectacle, just an amazing film. But this movie today is called The Menu, and I saw this the other night for the first time, and it stars Ray Fiennes. Ray Fiennes, who's just an iconic actor, and it came out in 2022. And this movie is bonkers. It stars Anya Taylor-Joy, who is fabulous in this movie. She is. I came across her as an actress in Robert Eggers' The Witch. She's had just an amazing few years. She's been in all kinds of great films. She's such a fabulous actor. It's really awesome to see her blossom as an actress and also get all of these great roles. Just tremendous. Ray Fiennes is, just an iconic actor. He's the lead in this film. This is such a fabulous role that he played. It's one of his best roles I've seen in many years. Nicholas Hoult is awesome in this too. He's another actor I've been following for a few years, a newer actor who is just incredible. He was in the first film I saw with him in it was the last Mad Max movie, which is just a modern day classic. Hong Chow is also in this film. Janet McTeer, Amy Caro, and Judith Light, who was used to be in Who's the Boss with Tony Danza, which is crazy. But she's awesome in this movie. And this movie is hard to categorize. I definitely say it's a horror film. Overall, it's definitely a dark. It's a dark comedy, but it's definitely a horror film. It's got elements of the slasher genre, but it is the thing that I loved about this movie. And again, I just watched it for the first time, and it's technically a new release, even though it came out 2022. And like I've said, there's a long lag because I don't stream movies, and there's all of these. There's always there's this huge lag when films actually get released to video or Blu-ray because of the streaming situation. So I get to newer movies much later than I want to. I go to the movies as much as I can, going to an actual theater. But it's there's less. I find there's less choices. Certain films are harder to see. Certain films have they're not in theaters as long. The menu, I don't know. I could be wrong, but I don't believe it had a theatrical run. I think it was only a streaming. It was only shown through the streaming format. I could be wrong, but I think that was the case. But it came out on DVD. I think about maybe a month ago, and I just saw it. And this movie's bonkers. Like it literally is. It well, I should say it's so utterly original, which I loved, which I just made me fall in love with it. And it's got this real. It's a satire, and it also has a level of social commentary on kind of where we are as a species, and it's definitely a look at how we are as a culture. And again, it's great because it's not too heavy-handed. I think it's really great. It's not preachy, but at the same time, it's also very much a horror film, and it has all of these great plot twists and turns, and it's not predictable, and it doesn't have, like I said, I definitely look at this as like a modern horror film, but it doesn't have those typical tropes that we see over and over again. It doesn't do the traditional jump scare thing, if you will. It has a real interesting narrative. It has it goes in as a film. It went into lots of different directions that I never predicted, that I couldn't see coming, and it was really funny. It's a really funny movie. The writing is pretty incredible. It's beautifully shot. The cinematography is very it's gorgeous. And the other thing is that it's such a well crafted film. I mean, from a technical standpoint and from a visual standpoint, this would be definitely a movie that I think that would be an awesome experience to buy on Blu-ray, because it's a real immersive film. It's a real interesting universe that this movie kind of pulls you in, and it's super twisted. It's really funny. It has all of these elements, of comedy. It's a satire. It has elements of a slasher film, like a classic slasher genre kind of thing. It's got a little bit of a mystery vibe to it, and it's just really funny. And the acting, uh, I think Ray Fiennes is, obviously one of the most iconic actors around, and this is great. I've never really seen him do a horror film like this before. I mean, the closest thing might be Red Dragon, which came out, which was a remake of Manhunter from the the Silence of the Lambs universe, which isn't that movie's okay. Like it's pretty good. It is a movie I want to see again. I also, I think he plays the Red Dragon or the Tooth Fairy, Ray Fiennes, and he's really great in that film. But there's something I don't know. I think that film is really underwhelming. It's not really. It always makes me want to watch the original Manhunter, the original film directed by Michael Mann, because that movie has this really creepy factor to it, and it just gets under your skin a little bit more, and the stakes seem a little bit higher. It's got more tension. Red Dragon is good, but it just seems like it's not fully realized. There's something about it. But Ray Fiennes is great, and that's the last film, or the only other film that I think of him where he played in a horror film, with the exception, obviously, of his stint in the Harry Potter series, where he was great in those films, The Deathly Hallows, Chapter One and Chapter Two. I mean, he's fabulous in that. So it's interesting to see him kind of in this movie that is, to a degree, more of a horror-based film, and he plays this really menacing, kind of frightening character. And this was a film I heard about. I heard a lot of buzz about for a long time, and I finally got to see it. And it was directed by Mike Mylod. Never heard of his work before. And I guess his background, he's a British television and film director, and he's produced a bunch of films. He's worked on a lot of television shows called Succession and Shameless. And I think this might be maybe his first full length feature film, which is interesting. Um, he worked on an Ali G episode, which is hilarious. Uh, yeah, but this is the first film he ever directed. He came out of the TV world, but again, the writing is for this movie is tremendous, and I just love how utterly original this movie is. It really takes you on a ride, and it really gives you something new. Um, and it's I don't know. It's to a degree, it's almost its own kind of genre. It's because of those the ingredients that it has in this film, where it does pull from lots of other genres. It creates this really interesting narrative, and it's almost like its own, almost reinventing the wheel a little bit. It's very cool, and it's a great original story. I don't believe that this is based on a short story or based on a book. Just fabulous. Really impressed. I was really, really impressed with this. I watched this the other night, and I just did a show yesterday on Tar, the new Todd Field film, and we watched Tar first, and then we watched The Menu, and I was like, this is great. Like, some similarities, obviously, with with both of these films having lots of layers to them, and some depth, and but just so utterly original, and great examples of just some really high level filmmaking that's happening now. Pretty inspiring. I try to always I typically, have my thing of where I typically watch a lot of older films, but I'm always trying to check out new things, try to keep my ear to the ground as far as new films that are coming out and new directors. and it does take me there's a longer period of time till I actually check out a lot of the newer films, but I've been really impressed with some of these films that have come out this year and also last year. There's been some really great films, and there's some movies coming out actually this month that I'm really excited about. But the menu was tremendous. Really, I was really excited after I saw it. One of the things that this movie reminded me of was from a short story that's one of my favorite short stories and one of my favorite stories of all time, and that is called "The Most Dangerous Game" by Richard Connell. That I love that short story. There's been so many adaptations of that story, and I got this feeling after watching or while I was watching the menu that there's definitely I'm sure that the story was that the most dangerous game was a big inspiration for this movie, and it's basically the classic story, most dangerous game. If you've never read it, I definitely say check it out. But it's basically centered the original story of the most dangerous game is centered on this really eccentric character called Count Zarhoff, who is this really wealthy man who basically owns his own island, and he's a hunter, but he becomes friends with all of these people, and he entices these friends and people to come to his island to stay. And then it's revealed that the idea of what the most dangerous game is, because he's a hunter, he's a psychopath, and he believes that the highest level of hunting is hunting fellow humans. And the whole story is centered on these people trying to escape and survive. And that's the whole premise of that story. And it's amazing. It's such a great horror story. And again, it's been, there's been many remakes of that. There's the original most dangerous game that came out, I believe, in the 40s, which is really great. There was a version of that film or of that story that came out with Gary Busey and Ice-T, which is really cheesy and terrible, but kind of awesome. Surviving the Game. There was also, I saw a recent adaptation of that story, of the story also, and I believe it's called The Most Dangerous Game, which I haven't seen, but I probably will see it just because I love the story so much. And if you've seen David Fincher's Zodiac, there's based on the serial killer in San Francisco in the 60s. There's numerous references to the Zodiac's letters of to the most dangerous game. The idea of like hunting humans and that being the ultimate form of hunting. So there's all these references to that story, and that was the watching the menu. That was one thing I felt was probably a big influence because it is centered on these wealthy elite, this wealthy elite group of people or an individual played by Ray Fiennes who pulls these people to his private island for his psychotic pleasure, and they're eventually all killed. So, but yeah, I highly recommend that story. But that was one thing I got from this film was that there was a lot of similarities with it. But again, totally original in every way. And I just think, it's when I see films like this that come out that are just so highly original and really give you something new, and are not relying on the same old, paint by numbers way of showing a narrative or explaining a narrative of a story, or your typical format. I just think it's awesome to see that. We're seeing examples of really new, really fresh ideas, being presented on the big screen. And this movie is definitely one of those. I think it's definitely one of the best. And again, it's a hard film to classify, but I look at it as a horror black comedy slash horror slash black comedy, and I think it's definitely one of the most original movies I've seen. One movie that I felt that was really really hyped that I was disappointed with is a movie called Smile, where that movie was really really hyped. I heard about both of those films together a lot. Smile is more of a full on horror film. It's not really a comedy. It's not it doesn't have a. It's not a satire in any real way. It doesn't really tackle any kind of social things. But it was really hyped, and I felt that movie was good, but it was so predictable, and it also ripped off another movie that I really love called It Follows, which when that came out was a highly inventive piece of horror. And I felt that Smile was literally ripping that film off. Where the menu I feel is just really fresh and exciting, and I've only seen it once, but I felt like okay, I haven't seen anything like this before, and this is a really fun ride, and it doesn't have. I have to pay attention to it. It's not. It had a lot of interesting surprises and directions that it pulled you. It pulled you in all these different directions, and great movie, really great. Definitely one of the better ones I've seen. Well, it came out 2022, so I have to say last year. But yeah, definitely check out the menu. If you're a fan of good horror films, but obviously it has other genres thrown in the mix, this is the movie for you. So thanks again. This is Jason Dean. If you like this page, please like and subscribe and to it, and keep the comments coming. All right, peace.